I knew he was married. From the very first moment, I knew he never wore a ring, but there was something about the way he spoke, carefully, as if every word had to go through a filter, as if part of him belonged somewhere else. And it did, but I still fell for him, not carefully, not slowly, not wisely. I fell the way children do, all at once, without fear, without thinking about the landing. He was older, much older than me. I was 23, working part-time at a little bookstore cafe, fresh out of university, still trying to figure out who I was. He came in every Thursday afternoon, always alone, always with a quiet presence that made the room feel different, not louder, not warmer, just deeper. Like suddenly, everything had more meaning. The coffee smelled stronger. The clock ticked slower. My own heartbeat felt louder in my chest. He wasn't handsome in the obvious way, but there was something about him, the way he listened, the way his eyes held stories, the way he asked about the world like he still wanted to understand it. He made me feel seen at an age where so many men talked over me. He was the first who talked to me. It started with books. He picked up a novel I loved, and we began to talk. Not flirting, just sharing. Every week, we'd talk a little longer, sometimes about stories, sometimes about life. One day, he said, "My wife loves that author too," and my heart sank, but I smiled anyway. Because it was already too late, because a part of me had already started writing him into my story. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know what to call it. It wasn't an affair. We never kissed, never touched, but I thought about him all the time. In the mornings when I got dressed, at night when I closed the shop, when I read something beautiful and imagined sharing it with him. I knew he would never be mine, but I loved him anyway. Gently, from a distance, like sunlight through a window I could never open. He came in less often after that, sometimes every other week, sometimes not at all. But whenever the doorbell above the cafe rang, my heart would jump, just in case it was him. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. But the hope, it always showed up before my logic could stop it. He never gave me false promises. He never said he loved me, never told me he'd leave her. But love doesn't always need words. Sometimes it lives in the pauses, the shared silences, the way someone looks at you like you make the world feel softer. And that's what he gave me. One rainy afternoon, he sat across from me in the back room. It was quiet. The other barista had gone home. The lights were dim, and the storm outside made everything feel more honest. He was holding a mug of tea, staring into it like it held answers he didn't want. And then, softly, he said, "She's getting better now. She's stronger, and I want to be better for her." I nodded, because that's what a good person would do, right? Smile, encourage, say, "I'm happy for you." But inside, I felt like I was being erased. Like a chapter he decided not to read again. That night, I stayed at the cafe long after closing, wiping down tables that were already clean, refilling sugar jars that didn't need it, just avoiding myself, because the truth was I had given my heart to someone who was never going to hold it. And yet, I didn't regret it, because when he looked at me, really looked at me, I felt like I mattered. Like I was more than just a girl behind a counter. Even if it wasn't love the way I wanted it. Even if it ended before it ever really began. I started writing in my journal again. Something I hadn't done in years. I wrote about him. About the way he held his coffee mug with both hands. About the wrinkle near his eyes when he smiled. About the silence between us that said more than most conversations I'd ever had. And I wrote about how it hurt. How I missed someone I never really had. Some days I hated myself for it. I told myself I was foolish, that I should have known better. That falling for a married man, no matter how kind, was still falling into pain. But other days I felt proud, because I had loved with my whole heart, even knowing it could never be returned. And there's something brave in that, too. One evening, just before closing, he came in again. But this time felt different. He looked lighter, resolved. He handed me a book, hardcover, wrapped in paper. "I saw this and thought of you," he said. It was Jane Eyre. I smiled, even as my throat tightened. I had once told him it was my favorite. Inside the cover, he had written, "Thank you for reminding me that someone could still see me, even when I couldn't see myself." That was the last time I saw him. He walked out into the night without turning back, and I let him go, completely, finally. That night, I sat in my apartment with the book in my lap, and I cried, not because I lost him, but because I had finally let go of a story that wasn't mine to hold. The days after he left felt still, not empty, not shattered, just still, like the calm after a storm, when the windows stop rattling, when the thunder fades, and all that's left is the quiet task of cleaning up. I didn't cry much after that, not the way I expected to. Maybe because part of me had already been grieving long before the goodbye. I had mourned him every time he walked away first, every time he chose silence over presence, every time he mentioned her name, and I smiled like it didn't hurt. Now it was just me and the book he gave me, and a version of myself I had to relearn how to live with. I stopped waiting at the cafe door, stopped checking my phone during lunch breaks, stopped wearing that shade of lipstick I knew he liked. I started walking home instead of taking the bus, started playing music again, started saying no when people asked for more of me than I had left to give. I wrote more, not about him, about me. I wrote about the mornings I finally woke up without thinking of him first, about the nights I stopped replaying every conversation, trying to find what I could have said differently. I wrote about how love shouldn't feel like hiding, shouldn't feel like holding your breath, hoping someone might turn around. I began to realize that the hardest part of losing him wasn't the absence, it was the way he had made me feel, visible. And now I had to learn how to see myself again without his eyes. One Sunday, I cleaned my apartment top to bottom, opened every window, let the sun in. I moved the little bookshelf he once complimented, rearranged the novels, lit a candle, not because he might visit, but because I wanted my space to feel like me again. And for the first time in months, I sat on my couch with tea in hand, and the silence around me felt kind. That week, a customer came in, young, nervous, clutching a book like it held his whole personality. He asked me what I liked to read. I smiled and told him honestly. We talked, not long, but long enough, and when he left, I didn't think about the married man. I thought about the sound of my own laughter, how it didn't feel borrowed anymore. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some days, I missed the way he made me feel, but more and more, I began to miss myself more. And that was the shift. I started leaving my phone at home, stopped waiting for a name that wouldn't appear. I filled my time with long walks, old movies, new pages. One evening, I passed by a small flower shop. He once told me his wife loved lilies. I used to avoid them. That day, I walked in and bought a single lily. I placed it on my table next to his book, not as a tribute, but as a symbol that I was no longer afraid of what had hurt me. One day, I found an old scarf folded in the corner of my closet. The one I wore the first time he said, "You look lovely today." I held it in my hands, brought it close to my face. It didn't smell like him anymore. It didn't smell like anything, just fabric and a memory. I smiled, not because I missed him, but because I didn't need him anymore to feel lovely. I met someone new eventually, not right away, not out of loneliness, but out of peace. He wasn't mysterious. He wasn't older or unavailable or complicated. He was just kind and present and honest. When he held my hand, it didn't feel like a secret. It felt like something that could grow in the daylight, and I realized that's what I had always deserved. Not stolen moments, not whispered affection, not love that made me smaller just to keep it hidden, but something simple, true, free. One night while walking home, I passed by the bookstore cafe. It looked the same: warm lights, old books, soft music, but everything inside me felt different. I stood there for a moment, watching someone else behind the counter. Young, hopeful, and I wanted to tell her, don't lose yourself for someone who's only visiting your life. You are not a waiting room for someone else's confusion. But I didn't say anything. Some lessons we have to learn for ourselves. Later, I opened the book he gave me, Jane Eyre. The note was still there. Thank you for reminding me that someone could still see me. This time, I didn't cry. I closed the book, placed it back on the shelf, and whispered to myself, thank you for teaching me to see myself. I don't regret loving him. I regret forgetting myself in the process. But even that was a part of my becoming. Because some stories aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to shape you, to soften you, to show you what you truly need. And once they've done that, you let them go. I was just a girl who loved like a child and hurt like a woman, but rose again like someone who finally understood her worth.